might remember about November last year, I preached a sermon on Jesus on the way to the cross. If I took a quiz, I wonder how many people would remember. Today I want to talk more about in the shadow of the cross and look what happened with Jesus. I first want you to ask yourself, have you ever been in dread of something that is about to happen, or something you know you have to do and you don't want to do it, you don't like to do it, or it may be anything that that we have to do, like have a discussion with someone that's wronged you and you're not looking forward to doing that. Sometimes we're powerless to stop what is about to happen. Perhaps, again, it is something you have to do, something you just can't avoid. It's going to happen. Think about Jesus and his crucifixion just being a few hours away. The night before his crucifixion would have been a night of great anguish for Jesus when you think about what took place, what he had to go through. There was mockery, there was disrespect, there was outright dishonesty from the leaders of the Jewish religion. The leaders of the Jews was determined to kill Jesus, and they would stop at nothing to achieve that goal. This is real. This is what happened. This is history, what Jesus went through, what he did for us. Crowds of people among them, no doubt, were those who joined in the hosannas just a few days before. They are now being incited by the religious leaders to shout his crucifixion. As the ugliness of that night might appear, we began to notice Jesus' statement to the Jewish leaders in Luke 22:53. You know, I'll just go back to that passage, Luke 22 and verse 53. He said, "When I was with you daily in the temple, you did not try to seize me, but this is your hour and the hour of darkness." Just imagine that. We can say that it is the time when evil reveals itself, exercises its power. Dark times can come to us, even come in God's most magnificent work through his Son. And we need to understand that, the legacy that he has left us, what he went through to bring about our salvation. Come with me to Matthew chapter 26. Matthew 26, and we'll read from verse 36. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray over there." And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me." He went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, "What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, a second time he went away and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done." And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. 3 times Jesus prayed to God, "Thy will be done." He knew what he was going through. He knew what was going to happen. And here we see the human side of Jesus. Clearly, the prospect of a cross was a horrible thing to contemplate. Just think about how sometimes you hurt yourself, and boy, you complain for weeks, it still hurts. But think about what they did to Jesus. We all know what he went through, and it's reality again. It's history. So horrible. It was the worst death that anyone has to face, was a cross. And Jesus also had to face the anticipated dread of being forsaken by his Father. When we're talking to God, how intense are our prayers? Or is it just a quick off the blah, 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 look after me today, etc.? When we think about Jesus, who was facing the ultimate problem, said, "Thy will be done." He said, "If it's possible, take this away from me, but your will be done." He knows it couldn't be done. He knows what God was expecting of him. Just lost a passage there for a second, sorry. So again, notice how Jesus prayed to God with sweat drops like blood falling from his face, because he was so concerned about it. His prayers were so intense. Great drops. How terrible was the anticipation of this event. In verse 43, and he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. Jesus needed help in his hour of testing. We are no different. We often need help, but we fail to ask for it. We just think, "Oh, we'll get over it, we'll get through it, we'll do it. Oh, it's weighed me down a bit, it's a bit heavy." How earnestly do we pray to God about the things that are on our mind? Or is it just something, as I said before, we do quickly, and I've done that? Look at Jesus. You do forget to use it. Think about the things you face in life. Should not the prayer of Jesus be our prayer? God, that your will be done, despite what's happening in my life. Intense, pleading, meaningful. This was the prayer of Jesus, heartfelt. What about the apostles? Surely they would not forsake Jesus. They are still here with him. After the supper, they go with him into the garden. We read back in Matthew that Jesus says to Peter, James and John, "Stay here and watch with me." But what do we read about this? Jesus found them sleeping. Could you not watch with me for 1 hour? Could you not just spend an hour concerned about me? Oh, but we're tired. Jesus also teaches a lesson in his darkest hour. Come over with me to Matthew chapter 26. Matthew 26, and we'll start at verse 41. Again, it's what we read before. Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And this is a passage that is quoted often. The conflict between flesh and spirit is a real one. We face daily problems. People, I know one guy I said before, challenges my faith. Do we stand up for what we believe in, like Jesus did, or do we give up and say, well, I'll just be quiet? And sometimes we can be critical of the apostles. So ask yourself, could I have done better? Could you have done better than what they did? I wonder. Could I have done better? Denial of faith. You don't want to rock the boat. I know there's a lot of Christians go about their life not telling people they are Christians in case they get criticised, unless they get challenged. Do I do better? Do I deny my faith? don't want to rock the boat, don't want to stand up for what we believe in, give in far too easily. We need to dig in as Christians. Over in Mark chapter 14, Mark 14, and we'll start at verse 43. And immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. Now his betrayer had given them a signal, saying, "Whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him and lead him away safely." As soon as he had come, immediately he went up to him and said, "Rabbi, Rabbi," and kissed him. Then they laid their hands on him and took him. The well-known kiss of betrayal from Judas. The plan had been well laid. The rest obviously could not be a public thing. Judas knew partly the habits of Jesus, and he knew the garden. Sorry. Luke 22:6 tells us that he, Judas, promised and sought opportunity to betray Jesus to them in the absence of a multitude. Significant to note here that this was not a Roman event, it was the so-called religious leaders who were doing this. And what happened to Judas? Yes, we see some remorse from Judas, but something is missing in Matthew 27 and verse 3. Matthew 27 and reading from verse 3. Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." And they said, "What is that to us? You see to it." Then he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. We do see some remorse from Judas here, but we don't see any evidence of repentance. There's a lot of speculation surrounding the intention of Judas in betraying Jesus, but the fact remains, Jesus did betray Jesus knowing him to be innocent. And then we see Jesus come before Annas and Caiaphas. Come over with me to John 18. John 18. John 18, 12. Read 12 to 14. Then the detachment of troops and the captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him, and they led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. Now it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. And then again in verse 24 of that same chapter, then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Annas had been the high priest for nearly 10 years. He was deposed by the Romans. His son-in-law, Caiaphas, was appointed in his place, but history indicates that Annas was the real power and exercised it for many years. Matthew 26. We'll look at verse 57. Matthew 26. Read from verse 57. And to 68. And those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it again in 3 days. Then the high priest arose and said to him, "Do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you?" But Jesus kept silent, and the high priest answered and said to him, "I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "It is as you said. Nevertheless, I will say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, "He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of any witnesses? Look, now you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think?" They answered and said, "He is deserving of death." Then they spat in his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, "Prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you?" Matthew refers here to the religious leaders looking for false witnesses. It seems likely that a few words of blasphemy and false witness were enough to put Jesus to death. The Jews could not legally execute Jesus without the Roman governor's authority, and we see John 18:31 that took place. And again in Matthew 26, pardon me, verse 69, we read about Peter. Peter was following at a distance, and we can see why when we read here in Matthew 26, 69 to 75. Now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him, saying, "You also were with Jesus of Galilee." But he denied it before them all, saying, "I do not know what you are saying." And when he had gone out to the gateway, another girl saw him and said to those who were there, "This fellow also was with Jesus of Nazareth." But again he denied with an oath, "I do not know the man." And a little later, those who stood by came up and said to Peter, "Surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you." Then he began to curse and swear, saying, "I do not know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the words of Jesus, who said to him, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." So he went out and wept bitterly. Jesus had already told Peter that he would deny him. Peter denied that. "No, Lord, I'll be with you. I will stay with you. I'm prepared to die with you," was Peter's conviction. In that same passage in verse 34, Jesus said to him, "Assuredly I say to you that this night before the rooster crows you will deny me." Peter said to him, "Even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you." And so said all the disciples. So when we see this happening, it's not hard to imagine that we can become like that ourselves. Yes, I'm a strong, faithful Christian, but we don't commit ourselves fully. Even with Peter, "Never deny you, Lord." Absolutely not, no way. As it became harder, giving up on that. And we've got to be careful not to become like that ourselves. You see that Peter is in the company of enemies of Jesus. Not surprising, really. But we need to stop and think, how many times does this happen whilst we're in the wrong company? So easy to do the wrong thing because it becomes easy. Familiarity breeds contempt. Maybe no one will notice I'm a Christian. They won't challenge me. I'll just try and be normal. We don't want to rock the boat. Matthew 26:56 records, then all the disciples forsook him and fled. I believe we know and understand that fear is a very powerful motivator for us. It can certainly cause us to forget what our conviction is and what it should be. If we are so adamant, then those words can come back to haunt us. I'm sure their words did. History and tradition tell us they all, with the exception of John, later died for their faith. And I can't help it reading overseas, I forget the country where it is now, where Christianity is not allowed. And if anyone meets or a group meet, they just shoot them. They don't allow Christians. These people know that. They're trying to live their Christian life with that thing hanging over their head that we could be next. They still continue on. That's what we're saying here. History and tradition tell us, with the exception of John, they did die for their faith. The question arises, what are you willing to do? What am I willing to do? How far are we willing to go by our faith? Revelation 2 and verse 10 says this, do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison that you may be tested, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Especially when we're coming under pressure, we need to remember these words. We need to remember the words of Jesus, how he prayed. 3 times he went to pray, and those who said they would support him fell asleep. How strong are we? What is our motivation? How do we deal with it when we come under pressure? Persecution, difficult times will only last for a brief time compared to eternity. God never lets us be tested beyond what we can bear. For some, faithfulness may mean death or very difficult times, but courage should be taken because God will provide a permanent, everlasting reward. There is, of course, more that can be said of this dreadful night and morning, but this will be enough to convict ourselves to be stronger, to be more faithful, to allow ourselves to be challenged, to stand up for what we believe in. Today is enough for us to think about betrayal, disrespect, hypocrisy, and abandonment of Jesus, the things that he did for you and I. What about you? What about me? Are we guilty of these things? It's easy to just listen and to read this as words on a page, but they are real. It is real. Its more significant, more pathetic words could never have been written. And those words have been written for us all. The question is, what will you do about it? What are you doing about it in your Christian life? How strong are you? How reliable are you? What are you doing about it? What are you doing with your life? Eternity is forever. And one day, Jesus is coming back to take the faithful home. We want to be among those. We have to stand up for what we believe in. Think about these words and think about your life. And as we stand and sing a song, think about these things too. Thanks, brother.